Hi, I'm singer-songwriter Mark Guerrero, and I watch Shadow Ridge School's YouTube channel.
The following program is brought to you in living color on NBC.
Hi, this is the Vince Vivian Experience. I'm Vince Vivian, and I am here with...
I'm Owen, Lyon.
I am Finley, Lyon.
And can you please introduce yourself?
My name is Mark Guerrero.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in East Los Angeles, East LA as we call it, East Los.
Ooh, fun.
And how was that? How was the experience? How was the culture around there?
It was actually great. You know, I remember I met this guy and he made fun of me because I said, I'm so happy and so proud and so lucky to be growing up there. And he goes, are you kidding me? Wouldn't you have rather grown up in Maine by the ocean? No, I loved it because my experience was great, you know.
Yeah.
Musically, it was a beautiful place to be, but also just growing up, I just loved the whole experience. And of course, nothing's ever perfect, but I'm just saying I had a great time growing up there. It was a special place.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How would you say, like, growing up there, how would you say that inspired you, like, musically? And, like, yeah, how did that?
Well, music was big there, big, you know. The high school dances, all the music. In my day, it was like doo-wop music and a lot of, R&B, and it was before the British invasion. But, we had our little school dances and all that. But, my dad was a musician, which we'll get into later. So it was real easy for me to gravitate to music because he was around the house writing songs, and he had a band. And so I had that experience there. But around 1963, a big music boom happened in East Los Angeles where just sort of out of nowhere grew all these young teenage bands, and there were all these teenage venues, tons of them. So I had a band when I was in the ninth grade, and I was playing weekends. And through high school, I was playing just virtually every Friday, Saturday, and it was just a special place. Sometimes they happen, like Liverpool during the Beatle era or Seattle during the Kurt Cobain, Nirvana era. There's places where there's music booms. In East LA in the 60s, there was just a lot of bands, a lot of places to play,
Yeah.
and a lot of people making records. It was great.
Yeah.
When did you first become, like, interested in music? What was the reason that you became interested?
I don't remember. Well, back in my day, in high school and in elementary school, there were music programs. I hear that today a lot of them have been cut. But when I was in elementary school, you could join the orchestra. So in the third grade, I decided to join the orchestra, and I mistakenly picked the clarinet. That wasn't very cool. So I played clarinet for 6 years, from the third grade to the ninth grade. And then somewhere along when I was about 12, I decided, hey, guitar is where it's at. But so I got a real cheap guitar, started out at 12, and by 13 I got an electric guitar and started my first band. So I've been playing in bands since I was 13.
Sweet.
So having your dad around the house, he's famous for his music. How did that sort of, like, did he really teach you about the guitar? Did he teach you about all this music stuff?
He taught me my first few chords, and it got me going. He tells a story in his autobiography, and this really happened. I asked him to buy me a little cheap guitar in Tijuana. We went to Tijuana. We bought it for $8, this little acoustic guitar. And he showed me a few chords, and then the car broke down, and we had to wait for a few hours to have it fixed. And he says that by the time we were driving home, I was playing and singing La Bamba. Literally. That same day.
Yeah.
So it kind of came natural. And but he showed me a few chords. But another funny thing is when the Beatles came out, I Want to Hold Your Hand was their first number one, I believe, in the United States. Mm-hmm. And it was more complex than the usual doo-wop songs and surf songs. It had different chords and different changes. So I remember my dad helped me figure out I Want to Hold Your Hand. But other than that, he didn't teach me anything, but I'm sure I got some of his DNA.
Yeah. Of course.
I have a question. How would you say that, like, being a musician throughout high school and, like, how you said you used to play bands when you're in, like, ninth grade, how would you say that gave you, like, an identity, like, around, like, your local area, like, in East LA?
Yeah, I was kind of famous around East LA, and as a matter of fact, it started to bother me, And I could see how people would get world famous, how annoying that could be, because everywhere I'd go, if I wanted to be anonymous or go to a dance and meet girls, oh, you're from Mark and the Escorts. I was like, no, I'm not,
Yeah.
You wanted a little privacy, but yeah, I was pretty well known around East Los Angeles. My first band was called Mark and the Escorts, and we made 2 records when I was just turning 15.
Nice. What was it like having a famous father, basically named the father of Chicano music?
It's, good and bad, Back then, I was horrified by it because I just wanted to be a regular kid and fit in. I didn't want to be some, star's son.
Yeah.
And so I never talked about it. And when Mark and the Escorts would play, I would never mention it. It was never brought up. I never brought it up because I just wanted to do everything on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And one time I played this show, and it said, the son of the famous orchestra leader, Lalo Guerrero, and I was mortified,
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I was ashamed of him. I just didn't want to use that or have that be a part of what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Later, there was no way around it, and I embraced it, and, we worked together, and everything was great. But when I was young, I tried to keep away from it. But I'm also unique in the sense, not unique, but like, say, a John Lennon's son or Bob Dylan's son, that's different because that's global.
Yeah.
They can't go anywhere without that. With me, it was only in the Chicano community, the Anglo community or Hollywood, or they didn't know who he was. So I was anonymous in the greater world, but among Chicanos and Mexicans, it was a big deal. To this day, it's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So that was good. So I had the anonymity. And so when I started recording for major labels in the early 70s, my dad had nothing to do with it because those companies didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
So do you think his fame sort of like helped your early career, sort of when coming to popularity and all that stuff?
I don't think so because, like I said, I didn't use it in the early days, my bands in East L.A. And even my record deals with Capitol Records, A&M Records, Ode Records, produced by Lou Adler, who's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a producer. Those people didn't know who he was, so it didn't really help me. But later on, I went back to school after a few years after dropping out of college. I went back, got a degree in Chicano studies, and my music started to Latinize more in subject matter and style. And then my dad was getting more well-known in many ways. And then there was no escape from it, pretty much it would always come up. But I embraced it at that point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think you're able to be like more independent from like your father because like your early stuff was like less Chicano related and you're able to kind of like build your own name off of that in your area?
Very nice. A good question. Thank you for that question. My early stuff had nothing to do with sort of his style whatsoever. I was doing rock and roll and country rock, pretty much like Buffalo Springfield or that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that part was different. But then after I studied Chicano studies and started writing songs about the Aztecs and a different Mexican and Chicano subject matter, then my music started to get more like my dad's, and we could do shows together,
Yeah.
and it started getting closer. And then by the time he got really old, we started doing shows together a lot. Yeah, so it didn't wind up, and so it benefits me certainly in the Chicano community, and but not so much in the greater music world.
Yeah. How was your mother like?
Wow. She's an unsung hero or heroine. Because, my dad acknowledges that without her, he couldn't have become well-known because she helped give him the confidence. She bought him great custom suits. She pushed him out there. You could be solo. He was wondering when he was in groups, could I be a solo? She pushed him, and, she helped him run his nightclub when he bought a nightclub. And she was the strength in the family, really.
Yeah.
And people that she was the one my brother and I would go to for advice, not my dad.
Yeah.
Would you say she was like a very strong point in your life?
Oh, very, very strong woman, very wise woman, very loving, very unselfish. So she was great. Margaret Marmion was her maiden name.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Margaret Marmion. She was half Irish and half Mexican.
So, I was just wondering, like, you said your mother was like a strong, like a backbone to you. So you think she allowed you to like lay a firm foundation for you to like build upon? Like without your mother, you wouldn't be able to be like such a superstar that you are today?
Well, I don't know about that, but I got lucky. I got lucky because it was actually devastating. My parents divorced when I was 12, which was very painful, very devastating. But the benefit I had from it was being raised by my mom from like age 13 up. When I was playing music, without a dad there, I had total freedom. I could come home at 1 a.m. I could, go and come. Whereas if my dad had been there might have been more discipline and more, you can't do that, or. So I just had a lot of freedom, and she gave me freedom to do what I needed to do.
Yeah. How did your first band evolve? Like,
Totally accidentally. And that's another important thing to tell, the young people, is that in life, some of the best things that ever happen just happen. You don't plan them, but they don't just happen by accident. They happen by the seeds that you plant, by the work that you do and what you do, And sometimes it's just fate, and you just go, thank you, universe, thank you, God, and whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
But bottom line is, 3 doors up from me in East LA was this kid who had a drum set. His name was Ernie Hernandez. And one day he came over to my house. I was playing in the yard. And he said, oh, come on over. I have another guitar player over. Why don't we just play? Oh, no, I'm playing tag right now. I didn't want to go over. And I just finally said, okay. I reluctantly got my little guitar and amp and went over there. And we started playing. And then we got a gig playing at a house party. And then we said, well, what are we going to call ourselves? Oh, we're the Escorts, okay. Then we started doing more gigs, and then suddenly we're a band, and we started adding a sax player, a singer. And then we wound up 7-piece, and we wound up making 2 records by the time I was 15. But that just happened organically, like I didn't plan it.
Yeah. What would you say was your favorite memory of Mark and the Escorts?
Let's see. Probably making those records. And I'll tell you, we got a deal. Our manager got us a deal with GNP Crescendo Records, and we did 2 singles, records, vinyl records. It had 2 sides, unlike a CD. And the A side of the first song was an instrumental called Get Your Baby. And we recorded it way back in 1964. And 52 years later, it was used in a major movie, Logan Lucky, starring Channing Tatum and Katie Holmes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen Daniel Craig. And if you check it out, an hour into the movie, when Daniel Craig is doing push-ups in prison, our song comes on, they play the whole song. So imagine 52 years later, you hear a song you made when you were 15 in a movie.
that's crazy.
It was crazy, and on the soundtrack album. But also over the years, the record has been on many compilation albums, Garage Rock and East LA Rock compilation. So that song, I just found out that on Apple Music, it's on the top 50 Chicano Rock Essentials list. And the top downloads, we were like number 38, that record.
Really?
Yeah.
What was the movie called?
Logan Lucky.
I've heard the name.
Someone write that down.
Check
It
it out.
has.
It's on
It
Netflix.
does
Hey,
sound.
someone give me a pen. I need to write that down.
Logan Lucky.
I have a question. While you're talking about your mom and how she was being a backbone, and how like your parents divorced when you were what did you say 12?
Yeah.
How do you think that music kind of helped you like get through that? Because you said it was like kind of devastating.
Oh, God, it's very painful. But it did help me because I had something fun to do and something that I, aside from school, that I could put a lot of time and attention to and play all these shows with all these great bands. And, it was a fantastic experience.
What was your first taste of stardom?
Well, I don't know if I'm a star, but
Beg to differ.
thank you very much. But the biggest time thing, probably ever, just about, was when I was 21, I got signed to Ode Records, ODE, and distributed by A&M and produced by Lou Adler, who had already produced Carole King and Mamas and the Papas. I don't know if you guys know those groups. They were big stars in the 60s and early 70s. So he was one of the top producers in the world. And he signed me. And I did a couple of songs with him producing. So I found myself at 21 recording with the best musicians really in the world. They called them the Wrecking Crew. The bass player and drummer, Joe Osborne and Hal Blaine, played on countless hit records. And I had 3 female background singers. One of them is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Darlene Love, Mary Clayton. Big time female background. I had a 20-piece string section. I mean, it was big time, And that record, you can hear it today. It's on. Look it up online. I did a video of it recently. It's called Lila Love Me Tonight. And you'll hear it. It's a good record. That was a pretty big time thing for that being that young.
So, what would you say, like, performance-wise, did you ever feel like a star, like when you were on a stage or anything like that?
Yes, I've had those moments, brief moments. You know, it's like there's been times like I've done a concert, like I played at the John Ensign Ford Amphitheater in Hollywood, which is across the street from the Hollywood Bowl. It holds about 1,200 people, and I had a 9-piece band doing all my material. You know, the place, you could hear a pin drop between songs, great applause, people dancing in the aisles, you know, where you know that what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
It's proof of what you can do. There's been moments like that over the years, you know, where I was in a big-time situation or on stage with a major rock star, and I'm playing with them, you know, Eric Burden or, you know, Denny Lane, various people, you know. But there's been a lot of moments like that where I was getting base hits in the big leagues, you know.
Yeah.
I have a question. So we were talking about a firm foundation with your mother and like your father from a young age. But how do you think, after getting signed to Ode, how do you think like you're able to build off of that? Like you're talking about how you're able to make different connections with bigger rock stars and really like grow in the industry.
Well, after the Lou Adler thing, I kind of got lost in the shuffle. Carole King's album Tapestry became the top-selling album of all time, so I got caught up and got lost in that. So a year later, I was recording for Capitol Records. Capitol Records is a label the Beatles were on, Frank Sinatra, the Beach Boys. You know, it's one of the major labels. So at 22, I was a solo artist on Capitol Records. I did 2 singles for them. The most important one being "I'm Brown," which is the song I'm most proud of, that I wrote and recorded in 72. And that song has been in the Grammy Museum twice in an exhibit called Songs of Conscience, Sounds of Freedom. And I got to perform it at the Grammy Museum in 2022, last year. And so that song I'm still trying to get out there in the world more because its message is great. Mm-hmm. It says, "Don't you know I'm brown? Can't you see my face? But I'm first a member of the human race." That's the chorus. But the verses are very protest, very Chicano pride. But the chorus is saying, "We're all human. Let's get over it," you know.
Yeah. Can you describe your band Tango?
Okay, so that's interesting. So that leads perfectly because at Capitol I was a solo artist. I had the same guys backing me up. Ernie Hernandez, that same guy that years ago dragged me out of the playground, out of my yard. He was the drummer. John Valenzuela on guitar. Rick Rosas on bass, who later became Neil Young's bass player and Joe Welsh's bass player. And then I had a couple of other friends from the neighborhood. Anthony Beret played Hammond organ, and Steve Verdugo played electric piano on the first single. We did 2 singles, and then I had a falling out with my manager. And so I wound up luckily getting signed by A&M Records as a solo artist again, and I used the same Ernie Hernandez, John Valenzuela, and Rick Rosas to continue to record for A&M. But A&M got the idea that they didn't want me to be a solo artist. They wanted it to be a band concept. So I wasn't too thrilled about it because I was a solo artist already. And so they wanted a band concept, so I said, okay. And then we wanted to call ourselves the Mudd Brothers, M-U-D-D. We liked that. That's the name we would go by when we did gigs, cover gigs. And we liked it because it's funky, it's bluesy. Mud is brown, we were brown.
Yeah.
And we loved it. And we said, okay, we're the Mudd Brothers. They said, oh, no. You guys are Latino. You should have a Latino-sounding name. Because by then Santana was out and Malo and El Chicano. But our music didn't reflect that.
Yeah.
You know? So I just came up with Tango because it didn't sound as, it sounded more generic. Marlon Brando's big movie, Last Tango in Paris, was out. It was very hip. It was right after he did The Godfather. And so I picked the name Tango, which I regret because it really, I think, messed up our chances with A&M because when our album came out, the cover was just the word tango across the front. So who's going to know it's a rock and roll album? They're going to think it's an Argentinian tango album.
Yeah.
We were on the back, and on the front was just the word tango. The worst possible name. It didn't reflect the music. So I think it really hurt us.
Yeah.
But that's how it happened.
We hear a lot about Ernie. Can you tell us more about him?
Oh, he's a great guy. He was in all my bands in the 60s. Mark and the Escorts, The Men from Sound, 1984. We did 2 singles for Cap Records, an MCA label, Universal label, and then with Tango. He's still around. He moved up to Eureka, California, but we still talk a lot. And every so often we'll do a reunion show. We've done reunion shows of Mark and the Escorts and Tango, and so we're still hooked up.
Yeah.
We'll probably play again more.
What's more fun? What's more like enjoyable?
Yeah, what's
to
the
you?
difference?
They're all fun. Although I'll tell you, it's funny. The first reunion show we did was in 2009, and it was we were hired by these young people, and all the other bands on the bill were like punk groups, and just I can't even use the word for one of the punk groups, but they were like people with mohawks or purple hair and young and in their 20s, and here these guys in their 60s show up. And there was only 2 Chicano bands, us and the Ambertones, another East LA band. Everybody else, maybe 10 other groups, were Anglo, young, punky groups. And we kicked butt over everybody,
Oh, yeah.
And all the young people were like, and we're signing autographs. And one of our girlfriends was in the restroom, and she heard some young girls say, I want to see those old guys. Yeah, they're real interesting, those old guys. But, yeah, we went over great, And one show we did at the Echo in Echo Park in Los Angeles, again, a bunch of young groups. There was only 2 Chicano groups, us and the Midnighters. And it was one of our best gigs as a reunion band. And there was like maybe 1,000 people in there, and they were going crazy,
Yeah.
So, so there could be just as much excitement with those reunion shows. We did one in San Diego called Tiki Oasis. It was all about garage rock and exotica. Same thing, we went over very well. All these videos are on YouTube, too, if you look up Mark and the Escorts reunions.
All right.
And we did one tango reunion at my first college, East LA College. We did one tango reunion.
Okay.
But it's fun. And then, you can have great gigs with any of those situations or some that aren't so fantastic. It just depends.
Yeah. What was it like touring? Like, what's your opinion on it?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't do a lot of touring because most of those early groups, we didn't get promotion.
Yeah.
Promotion. I think a lot of those companies didn't know what to do with a Chicano group. Capitol Records told my manager, hey, you should change his name. It'll really help. And I refused. And one of the people said, why are these Latinos doing rock and roll? They couldn't understand that we're Americans too, And sometimes they want to put you in the Latin division, which is the Spanish-speaking groups. So they just didn't know what a Chicano was or how to promote a Latino group.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times we didn't get any real promotion, and most groups would sign and get a tour. We didn't get a tour. We just got a local Southern California tour, So those early groups, we didn't really tour. We did some out-of-town gigs, but it wasn't until later in my life I did some touring. But it's something that I enjoy, but it can get old if you got to do it too much.
Yeah. So when you did tour, where was like your favorite location? Like the drive and the location itself?
Well, there was one tour I did, a small tour in 2010. I was playing with the Cannibal and the Headhunters group, and we played Ashland, Kentucky, and Roswell, New Mexico, and for that we flew from Burbank Airport to Chicago, from Chicago to Virginia. They picked us up there, took us to Kentucky, and then we flew to New York, and then from New York to Dallas. We went around the entire country for 2 gigs in the middle. Isn't that crazy?
It's wild.
That's wild.
But it was fun. We also did a PBS show in Pittsburgh that was great because there were like 55 groups, historic groups. They were playing over 3 days. A lot of great classic rock bands and artists, and we played on that show. That was a highlight too.
Yeah.
I toured with my dad. I played in Paris, France with my dad, which was fantastic.
How was Paris?
Oh, well, Paris is probably my favorite city in Europe, but it's just a great, artsy. You can find any kind of music, any kind of food. It's a beautiful city. But for us to go to Paris, France, me and my dad, they flew us there for one show, 45-minute show. I did 2 of my songs. We did about 10 of my dad's. And we got an ovation that lasted for like 5 minutes. And it was so emotional to, Chicanos to go to Paris, France, and just, kick butt like that.
Yeah,
And get a
enjoy
reaction.
that music.
Yeah, it was really, really, really special,
Mm-hmm.
I've also played in Liverpool, England. I've been there 3 times. I've played, at the Cavern where the Beatles started, and those are some of my best experiences as well.
Talking about how important it was for you to have like a Chicano presence in Europe, and you like not wanting to change your name and just like staying steadfast in your like culture. How do you think that's like walking around, having pride in that? How do you think that's shaped your career?
Well, it's probably hurt my career, but I'm proud of it. There was no way I was going to change my name. So it was. I feel proud about it. I'm happy about it. I wouldn't do it any different, but I think it really hurt me. And so that's the thing. I'm proud of it. But if I had been Mark Jones, that same record could have been a huge hit.
Yeah.
Lila Love Me Tonight, or Rock and Roll Queen, or some of those songs.
How does it feel to have your song like Pre-Columbian Dream covered by legends like Herb Alpert?
Herb Alpert, that was exciting. 1983. I wrote the song in '77. It's one of my best songs. It's top two songs, really, along with I'm Brown.
Mm-hmm.
But I wrote the song and I recorded it, and I financed this recording myself, and it's a really good recording. But it was never released. That's a whole other story, where Capitol Records was interested in me again in the early '80s, and I had a lawyer that just blew the deal out of the water. So it was never released. But then in the early '80s, it was used in a PBS show called Murals of Aztlán, about Chicano visual artists, muralists, and they used Pre-Columbian Dream and On the Boulevard in it, but they didn't want lyrics, so we took the lyrics out, the vocals out, and turned them into instrumentals. And so Pre-Columbian Dream was done by a trumpet player, mariachi trumpet player. And so that was eventually submitted to Herb Alpert, who was a trumpet player, and he liked it and he recorded it. So that was a big thrill, because he was a major artist, and plus he's co-owner of A&M Records. So that was a great thing. And then I just recently have an EP coming out within the next couple of months, and I re-recorded Pre-Columbian Dream in a very beautiful, organic way with an Aztec flute in it, and I added a bridge, and I kind of updated it.
I'm gonna listen to that.
Yeah. I'll send you a link. So you can hear it.
Yeah. Which encounters with famous people made like a big impression on you for your career, whether it's your life or your actual music career?
Well, I met a lot of incredible musicians and worked with them in some way. Not much of it helped my career in a sense, but it was thrilling to be on stage with Eric Burden of the Animals. I don't know if you know them. They're House of the Rising Sun. They had tons of hits in the '60s. Eric Burden's one of the great blues singers. He's an authentic blues singer that came out of England. And to be on stage with him doing his hits was very exciting. I've been on stage with Ry Cooder, a legend. A lot of people like that. I've been in the studio with Harry Nilsson, was a major star in the '70s. So it's very exciting meeting those kinds of people. But like I said, it didn't really lead to anything, but it's just something that you hold dear, in your heart.
Yeah.
I also met President Clinton in the White House, because my dad won National Medal of the Arts in 1997, I believe. And so my brother and I got to go with him to the White House, and met Clinton, and spend the whole night there partying and eating and watching entertainment, and that was kind of a thrill as well.
I have a question about. I have 2 questions actually. So, talking about the White House, how did it was not asking if that was like a milestone, but how did it feel to like be there? Meet the president as just like a young kid from East LA.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's another great question. Well, check this out. So they picked us up at the hotel in a minivan, and take us down to the White House, and they took us through the back entrance, of course. We go through the back entrance, and we're about to walk into the grand dining room, where it holds like 1,000 people, all these tables of 8 all over the place. So as you walk in, the PA system introduces you. And I wondered, well, how did they know who was who? Well, they believe me, they know who's who. So, we're walking in, and all of a sudden, I was behind Robert Redford. The actor Robert Redford, major star. So, so I'm walking behind him, and so I hear Robert Redford as he walks into the dining room. Mark Guerrero, I come in. That's a surreal thing. You're being announced walking into the White House, next to Robert Redford. So it's pretty weird, funny. And then we got to meet, during the afternoon we met President Clinton and Hillary Clinton at another venue where the award ceremony happened. That was the first time we met them. We got photographs. But then that night, I'm in a tuxedo, and I met the president again. I got another picture of that. And it's surreal because you just go, you can't believe you're in the White House. It's just this house, but you look out, there's the Washington Monument, and you figure, man, this is where all the presidents have lived throughout history, and here I am. It's kind of crazy. It's surreal. Yeah. And we got to drink champagne and dance around and have fun, and we were there like till around midnight. And so the whole thing was kind of surreal. I don't know what else to say, but it was a thrill.
Yeah.
Who do you consider your musical heroes?
Okay, I would say John Lennon, Bob Dylan, probably the top two.
Mm-hmm.
Beatles overall.
Yeah.
Those would be on the top of the Mount Rushmore for me.
Yeah.
But there's others that I really like: James Taylor, Buffalo Springfield, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
Mm-hmm.
But Beatles and Dylan up at the top.
Yeah. If you could give them each a ranking, 1 through 5, of your top 5 favorite artists.
And individuals, like individual Beatles, whatever?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd say John Lennon, Bob Dylan, Paul McCartney. I used to love Neil Young and Stephen Stills, Buffalo Springfield and Crosby, Stills and Nash. James Taylor. The band, which was Bob Dylan's band.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Those are kind of my favorite groups. And there were a lot of others, but those are probably at the top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to circle back. I keep thinking about your incorporation of Aztec flutes and music. How do you pride yourself on being able to use that? Because this is the first time I've ever heard someone bring up something from their culture from an ancient time, the ancient Aztecs and their flutes and instruments and things like that.
Well, again, when I went back to school and studied Chicano studies, one of the classes was about pre-Columbian Mexico, about the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Zapotecs and all the various tribes and the culture, and I just fell in love with it. And what gave me the idea for Pre-Columbian Dream came right out of what I learned in a class, and that was that when the Spaniards arrived in the Valley of Mexico, where the Aztec city was, Tenochtitlan, it was a city built on a lake. So you had pyramids rising out of a lake, and with causeways leading to the pyramids. And when the Spaniards came over the mountain and looked down upon this, their friar, who was their scribe, your teacher calls me the Scribe of East LA. He was the scribe, and he just wrote that when we came upon that city, we thought we were dreaming, because we never saw a city that beautiful in Europe anywhere. Imagine seeing this lake with pyramids rising out of it. So that's what triggered my song. Standing in the mountains so high above the valley below, on the central plateau in old Mexico, I gaze upon the silver lakes as the morning breaks on the temples that rise out of the blue. And I look at you, neath the heavens where the ancient eagles flew. And I can see the love that shows through your eyes as the ancient coyote cries. And that's where it came from.
Yeah.
And so when I record those songs, I want them to sound Aztec-y, if that's a word, Aztec-y.
Yeah.
Write it down.
Yeah, you don't want to put a saxophone on there.
Yeah. Do you think you can try to describe your greatest gig?
Wow. I would. Well, yeah, I have a few. Okay. Let's see. One, when I was marking the escorts, when I was about 15, we played at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles with about 20 other East LA groups, and some of those that had hit records at the time: Cannibal and the Headhunters, the Blendells, the Premiers, the Midnighters. It was most of the top groups of East LA were played there, and so I was part of that show. That was a big early thing. an album came out on that, and it's a legendary show. Another one was when I got to play at my own high school. I was in the 11th grade. I had a very popular band called the Men from Sound, and there was an actual rock show, like 4 bands, playing for the entire student body, 2 assemblies. So to play at your own school while you're a student,
Over here.
Garfield High School in East Los Angeles. So I'm playing with a great band that was hot, playing every weekend in front of the whole student body, and so that was huge. And we played great. That's seared into my memory. Playing with my dad in Paris was a huge one. Playing with Eric Burden for that show was a big one.
This is kind of an add-on to that question. What about when you played with Redbone?
Oh, okay. Let's see, how did that happen? Well, I met Pat. I had interviewed him for an article, and then I wound up going over to his house, and we jammed a little bit, and suddenly I was in the band, and we did a show. And it so happened that a guy who was in my band, the Men from Sound, was playing organ with him at the time. We hadn't played together in 30 years. So that's the first time I played with them. And then years later, when I was playing with Cannibal and the Headhunters, we wound up backing up Pat Vegas as Redbone and did a couple of shows in El Paso and one in San Antonio. I'm not in San Antonio, in Sacramento. And I love their music, so it was a lot of fun playing those songs, playing guitar on those songs.
Yeah. What was it like hanging out with Lolly Vegas?
Well, I just met him once. Did you read that? Because, by the time I played with Pat Vegas, Lolly had already had a stroke and couldn't play anymore.
Yeah.
So, but at that first show, and I think it was 2004, we were playing up near Fresno, and Lolly was there. And the whole band went into his hotel room after the gig, and we were talking to him, and then everybody else left. So I stayed, and Lolly and I talked for like 3 hours, and I really hold that dear because I got to know him pretty well in those 3 hours, and that was great.
Yeah.
You guys still talk today?
No, he passed away. Lolly passed away, at least 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I wanted to mention a previous question. The Cavern in Liverpool was another highlight gig.
You said you went to Liverpool 3 times?
Yeah.
Cavern was your favorite, right?
Oh, yeah, that was where the Beatles started. Of course, it's been rebuilt. The idiots tore it down,
Yeah.
about 30 years later, but they rebuilt it with the same plans, the same bricks, But just to be in Liverpool and meet guys that played with the Beatles, that knew the Beatles in the 60s, was a thrill. And, I got to be on the radio there every time I was there.
Mm-hmm.
So those trips are really, near and dear to my heart.
Yeah. Can you describe your website and your work today?
Yeah. Once again, the website started by accident. All the best things have been accidents.
Yeah.
I just see what happened. I met somebody that was doing website domains really early. This was '98, and he said, "Do you want a website?" I said, "Sure." And I got a domain.
Mm-hmm.
And then I happened to be playing with a keyboard player that was a web designer, so he made me a website for like $100. And then I thought, well, what am I going to put on it? So then I just started. I had already been writing some articles on Chicano rock in a local newspaper, so I just said, I'll throw them on there. And plus a lot of my own history, and it's been growing now for 25 years.
Yeah.
Documenting my own history, my dad's, the history of East LA rock, history of Chicano rock, and it's turned into some people have called it the Chicano Library of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel about the Grammy display of your song "I'm Brown"?
I was very proud of that because I know that that's a special song and record, but we didn't get any promotion, and it's great that it was recognized so many years later, and it's being recognized more and more, and that's one of my biggest goals, to continue to get it out there.
Yeah.
If you go on YouTube and put Mark Guerrero, I'm Brown, you're going to find tons of live performances of it, a studio version, a new video I did on it a few years ago with me now, lip-syncing to what I did in '72. But it's all over YouTube, it's all over the internet, and it's getting more and more notice. It's been mentioned in a couple of books.
Yeah.
What advice would you give young people today?
follow your passion. Whatever career you choose, make sure you love it, because you could become, say, a lawyer and make all the money in the world and have a great house and great cars, but you may be unhappy because you're doing something you don't love. Try to find something that you could get paid for that you love, whether it's science, math, music, whatever it is. Follow your passion and work hard, and put in the time, plant the seeds, put in the work.
Mm-hmm.
My dad has an old saying that it just reminded me of that. He said, "If you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life."
That's right.
So
That's right.
I think it's important. That's a good message.
I feel very fortunate that my entire life has been music and music related. I've never had a job. I had a couple of part-time jobs in college, but they're just part-time jobs.
Yeah.
But I made it.
Cash.
Yeah, I made my living with music and music-related things my whole life, and everything I do, whether it's my podcast, my Zoom show, my website, my lectures I've done. I've spoken at universities about Chicano Rock, East LA Rock. I've been to Ohio State, UC Berkeley, museums. Everything is related to music, so I'm happy every day doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, with all of our questions and bombardment to you, do you have any questions for us and about our school before we leave?
Well, I'm very impressed by it. It's very progressive, and how do you guys feel about it?
Well, I love it. I think it's a very great way for kids who aren't really good in a regular school setting, and if they need like extra help, they could definitely come here and do much better.
Yeah, I feel like as much as I was at school, is just like a wide group of people, and I've sort of connected with a smaller group of people here, like Vivian, Finley, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I enjoy it because I was a pretty good student. Not to pat myself on the back, but I think here it's more than just a school. It's more of a kind of like a community. Like at school, I wouldn't be able to talk to you. I wouldn't be able to meet all these great people and kind of expound on just like not just academics, but more of like becoming like a good young man. So I think it's very important.
And creative. I sense that it's a very creative situation. People like a lot of times people like us don't fit in the regular traditional stuff.
Just as long as you don't make a sound. Don't call us, we'll keep in touch. Just as long as you don't say too much. So take a step to the back of your heart. It isn't much, but it's a start. Don't you know I'm brown? Can't you see my face? But I'm first a member of the human race. Don't shout, don't you know I found out that you don't know what you're talking about. But Lord knows I know how it goes. Everybody's got to stay on his toes. Hey son, pick that off of the ground. I wake up, see what's going down. Don't you know I'm brown? Can't you see my face? But I'm first a member of the human race. guess they die. Don't you know that it's only a lie? Don't quit, duck, don't get hit. We're gonna make it bit by bit. Hey boy, get that shine on my shoes. You can't laugh when you're living the blues. Don't you know I'm proud? Can't you see my face? But I'm first a member of the human race.
Never boring. There's always something fun here at Shadow Ridge School.
Hi, it's in Shadow Ridge School, the best indie in the HD.
Hi, my name is Aaliyah Fowler and I'm from Shadow Ridge, the best indie school out here in Hesperia. You know what it is.
I go to Shadow Ridge School, the best indie in HD.
Good morning. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Ha ha.
That's the favorite because it matches with everything, right?
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Hey, hey.
Is the cone up here over there?